All right, if you liked my other video where I talked about how not to get nervous in front of people, where I brought on my boy, Grant Baldwin, founder of the Speaker Lab. Grant dropped his knowledge bombs, helping you not get stressed out when you're speaking in front of people. Well, today, I want to continue our Make 1K series and share Grant's story. So Grant was a public speaker. The guy was on the road, 200 times plus a year, and getting paid a lot of money to get on stage and talk to people. He was amazing at what he did. He mastered his craft, but he got to a point where he was tired of traveling, but not so much traveling, but traveling without his family. So he wanted to figure out a way how he could be at home more, create a business, a lifestyle that allowed him to be at home and be with his girl. So he began this journey of creating an online business, and my goodness, it's a fun one to hear. All right, so I'm here with my buddy Grant, and we want to kick this off is just letting the people know, like, what is your current business? What is the structure? How is it set up? How do you make money online?
So I run an online training company called the Speaker Lab, where we help speakers who are interested in speaking, those who are brand new, those who are just getting started, those who want to understand the business of speaking. How do you actually find and book speaking engagement? So we have a lot of people who are interested in speaking, maybe have done a few gigs here and there, but have no idea how much do you charge, what do you speak about, who books speakers, the ins and outs of that. So that's a lot of what we do. We do that in a couple different ways. We have an online training program that we offer primarily through automated and live webinars. We also have a higher end, high ticket program that we sell over the phone. We have a couple different sales reps that help with that. So those are the core things that we do, is more on the business side of teaching people the ins and outs of how to find and book speaking gigs.
So you were a professional speaker, you were on the road, you were traveling, you were loving it. Like, what was the inspiration behind starting the online business? Why did you create all this?
Yeah, so for some context sake, I was a full-time speaker for several years. I was doing anywhere from 60 to 70 gigs a year. Speaking is a lot of fun. The 30, 45, 60 minutes you're on stage is an amazing experience, but there's a lot of like non-glamorous, non-sexy parts behind the scenes. So a lot of travel, a lot of being away from the family, a lot of missed flights, a lot of connections, a lot of, all that goes into the travel side, all for, 30 to 60 minutes on a stage, which is, again, that amazing experience. So I got to a point where I was traveling, I was away from the family a lot, and just like, the reality with speaking is if you want to scale it, you either have to do more gigs or you have to charge more money. And so I was kind of at a point where I wasn't super intrigued by doing either of them. I was kind of on the upper end of what I was charging in my particular industry. But at the time, I had a lot of people who were asking me, hey, I'm interested in speaking. How do I become a speaker? I knew we'd figured out a couple good systems and things that worked. So I knew it was something that we could teach other people how to do. At the same time, I was starting to see more blogs, more podcasts, more online courses and online businesses pop up, and started trying to connect the dots of like, I didn't even know this was a thing, that this was an option. And so just kind of learning, all right, here's someone who has this skill set, who's teaching it via a course or through a webinar, and I see how I could do something similar with this kind of niche skill set that I have based on a lot of people asking me. So that's kind of the nutshell of it, is just as taking questions people were asking me and taking that, kind of turning it into a course, kind of thinking through what's the process of what we want to teach, ultimately to help people get the result of being able to find and book speaking gigs.
So just kind of throw this out there, because like a lot of people don't even realize that you can get paid to speak.
Right.
Right. Or if they know that, they have zero clue,
right,
how much that is. From somebody starting off to somebody that has been doing it for, say, 5 years,
right,
what's kind of an approximate range that people can get paid, for a gig?
Yeah, honestly, it can vary wildly. And so in fact, for simplicity's sake, we actually put together a free fee calculator that you can check out if you want. You can find it at myspeakerfee.com. Myspeakerfee.com is totally free. You can answer a couple questions and it'll tell you what you should charge as a speaker. So, but as a range, most speakers start somewhere around $1,000, and it can go up to, for A-list celebrities can charge $50,000, $100,000 or more. So it's absurd how much it can be. The other thing that's kind of interesting, I think, especially with this audience there, is that there's a lot of speakers who use speaking as lead generation for another part of their business. So for example, with you, for a long time, you were a financial planner. And so you may not be paid to go speak, but maybe you go speak at some type of, Chamber of Commerce event or a luncheon or something in the community, mm-hmm, and you generate business from that you can attribute, potentially thousands and thousands of dollars. So there's a lot of speakers that use that model of lead generation and actually generate significantly more from the lead generation than if they were charging an actual fee. So there's a lot of different ways that speaking can be very advantageous for entrepreneurs.
So when you were starting your online business, I mean, you were a full-time speaker, and now what you just described is you got a full-on operation, right?
Right.
So that transition, like, who was someone that helped you or a mentor to transition from being a full-time speaker to doing the online business?
Yeah, I don't know that I necessarily had one key mentor that I was really looking to. I think there were different parts of the business that I was learning from different people from. So, for example, we were doing John Lee Dumas was someone from Entrepreneur on Fire who, at the time, he was doing a weekly live webinar to pitch and promote his online training program about podcasting. So I noticed, okay, here's a model of someone who's doing a weekly live webinar. I see how this could work. Amy Porterfield was another person that I saw who was doing a lot of webinars and having success with it, leading to a course. So there's a few of those type of people that I saw, specifically in the online space, who were doing something where they were offering a webinar, they were driving traffic to the webinar. On the webinar, they were offering creating some type of offer of their product or service, whatever it may be, typically an online digital course, and then offering that on the back end. And so that's kind of like a big picture. There's a lot of little nuanced pieces that go into it. So a lot of it too was taking the time to opt in for different webinars or opt into different email lists, just to kind of learn like what is working, what are the types of emails people are sending on the webinar, what's kind of the format of the webinar, what's working, why did they do this and not that. And so it's really kind of paying attention to a lot of those people in different contexts that, and then kind of applying it and figuring out what made sense for us in our business. So just because someone did it this way on a webinar or in their course doesn't necessarily mean we had to do it that way in our programs as well. So just really kind of paying attention to what people were doing and then figuring out what made the most sense and what would work best for us and our audience.
You were a good public speaker. I mean, obviously people were paying you. I assume you were good. I think you got rehired several times. Yeah, I did.
It's a real vote of confidence right there.
You know, and with me being was a full-time financial advisor, like I was good at that. Yeah. But that transition to the online business, like there were a lot of things that I had to overcome, things I had to learn, things I had to untrain myself. Do you remember like any of the initial obstacles? Like something could be as little as like installing WordPress, but like something that just crap, like this sucks. Like I don't know if I can do this. Like, I don't know if I'm cut out for this. Do you remember anything like that?
Yeah, so one thing to remember is just because you're good at a certain skill or a certain craft doesn't necessarily mean it translates to being an entrepreneur. So it reminds me of that book, The E-Myth by Michael Gerber. And so the analogy he makes is just because someone's good at baking bread doesn't necessarily mean they should open a bakery. So baking bread and being really good at that and running a bakery are two totally different skill sets. And the same way, there's a lot of speakers who are really, really good at speaking who aren't necessarily good at running a business. And so they struggle. Right? Yeah. So the same way that like you could be the world's best financial planner, but if you have a hard time managing, maintaining, and taking care of clients, like you're really going to suffer at it. So yeah, I mean, I am someone who I'm tech savvy enough, but on a lot of like behind the scenes we have a lot of different tools, the webinar software, an email software, a checkout software, all these different tools, getting them to play nicely together was just over my head. So at least I knew conceptually what needed to happen, but even today, I don't fully understand what all has to happen behind the scenes to connect everything together. So one thing that we've done well is just try to find people who understand that. And even though it doesn't do anything for me, it doesn't excite me at all, I know there are people out there that love that part, that they don't necessarily want to be doing a webinar or creating a course, but they'd love to help backstage behind the scenes and helping with different pieces. So yeah, and even to this point, like even to this day, like you mentioned installing WordPress. I couldn't tell you the last time I went into WordPress, and I don't know that I would know the ins and outs. We were talking literally the other day with someone on our team about doing some websites for some of the speaking students that we work with. I was like, I don't know how to install WordPress. I don't know any of this stuff. So even to this moment, I'm still pretty tech ignorant on some of those pieces.
And since I'm like more of the blogger of the two of us, like I don't even know how to install WordPress right now. Right. I'd have to watch a YouTube tutorial to remind myself. So you make that you made the transition, but you're interested in it, like obviously staying home with the family, not having to travel as much. Right. Do you remember some of the first income that you made? Kind of a two-part question. Do you remember a time you got paid for doing something online where you didn't have to travel? Yeah. Actually, you got paid being in your living room, being home with your family. And then when did it get to a point where like you're making, like maybe at least like $1,000 or whatever that amount was, we're like, okay, this isn't just chump change. Like this is actually real money. Like this can be a real thing. Yeah.
Well, I remember the very first webinar that we did because we had been working for a couple months to create this course. And then the first time you do this webinar, first time you create some type of offer, you really have no idea, is this going to work? work? Is this not going to work? Maybe like people like it, they just don't buy it, you know? And so we created this and offered it. And I think that very first webinar, I think we sold it for, you know, like $300, $400, something like that. And we had, I want to say like 4 or 5 people buy, which was just like, it might as well have been $1 million, you know, you're just like, oh my gosh, it's actually worked, you know? And so even fast forward to today, where a lot of the webinars that we do are automated webinars, they're evergreen, they're happening literally right now as you're watching this video, and people that will watch them all over the world. And so sales still happen without me necessarily being there. And there are times where maybe I go to bed and I wake up and we had a sale or multiple sales that happened overnight. And so it's still like those surreal moments. You know, we were our families were on a trip together just recently, and you know, times where you're at the beach hanging out with your friends or family or whoever, and a sale happens, and you're just like, I can't even fathom that happens. Now, I think it's also important for people to recognize that, like, it's not necessarily a set it and forget it and like, all right, I'm done, and we're just printing money. It's not that at all. Like, there's still a lot that goes on behind the scenes and a lot to the machine to keep the machine going. So if we stopped and didn't do anything, that machine would run for a minute, but it's going to die out. We're going to run into issues and hiccups. And in addition, we're always like testing and tweaking and optimizing and making sure that we're doing everything we can to give students the best possible experience, but also to get the most people into the program. So there's always a lot to be testing, improving, tweaking, and making better, both for the students and for our business.
You just mentioned, you know, we were on a family vacation, our families together, you know, making sales while you're at the beach. Right. We also took a houseboat trip, you know, with some other guys in our mastermind group, and we even talked about it'd be kind of funny to add up like how much money we all made, you know, while we were there on the houseboat. We're too busy doing jet skis actually to take the time to do that. But do you remember, like, in the earlier years of getting a notification or, you know, getting a sale, like when you weren't actively doing a webinar, like you weren't actually working, you were just on a weekend trip, or, you know, after hours that you actually made a sale, like you're like, hey, look at this, I just made money, I'm not doing anything. Right. Did anything come to mind?
There's one in particular I remember. A couple years ago, our family went down to the Panhandle in Florida, and we were on the beach, and we were just there for, I think, 3 days or something like that. And I remember that the number of sales that happened on the trip actually paid for the trip. We made more on the trip than the trip cost us. And it's just one of those like surreal experiences. Like, and I remember even after that, a couple of other trips where we had like a good number of sales while I was gone. I was like, maybe I should just take more trips, because it seems like every time I'm gone, we end up making more money. So yeah, it was just still one of those like mind-boggling, crazy experiences.
Now that you've been doing this for a number of years, you got more experience, you feel comfortable, somewhat confident. Obviously things can always change, but you know, like, you still feel pretty good about what you got set up. Are there anything, if you can go back to your younger self and, you know, take them by the shoulders and shake them, and like any advice that you would tell that person, like just starting, like, hey Grant, younger Grant, like don't do this, or don't get stressed out about this, like anything you want to tell that younger Grant?
Yeah, little Grant. I think there's 2 things that really come to mind. One would be to have a long-term perspective on this. I think sometimes, you know, if I look back to like that very first webinar, let's say I did that first webinar and we had, you know, we had 1 sale or no sales. It would have been easy to be like, this online business stuff doesn't work, or it's not for me. But have the long-term perspective that it's like, it's kind of like, you know, pushing a boulder, you know, like when you're first pushing it and you're trying to get going, like it takes a massive amount of effort, and to make any type of progress, that's where when you get that first sale or you get that first, you know, dollar through AdSense or whatever it may be, it's just like crazy. So using that momentum to continue to keep going and to continue pushing forward. So having that long-term perspective. The other thing too, that I would say, actually before I get there, just thinking through, I think it's easy sometimes to look at someone who may be like a couple of steps ahead of where you are. And I know we can be guilty of that, you know, like even where we are today, and we have, you know, some little level of success, but to look to people who are steps ahead of us and be like, well, you know, yes, we may have some success, but we're not at that level. We're not where they are. But at the same time, realize like, they've been doing it longer, or they've been at it longer. So it's not fair to us or to them to compare where we're at, for where we're at today, to where they are when they have, you know, several years of a head start on us. The other thing I would say would just be to stay focused, because I think it's really, really easy as entrepreneurs that we have this shiny object syndrome. This guy has it really, really bad. And so it's really easy to, here's this thing we're gonna try. Ooh, that's cool. Ooh, we should do that. And we just try all these different things. And I would say this, like even as recently as a couple of months ago, we, within our business, were tinkering with a few different things that were good ideas that could have some merit and potential, but realized it was like taking us away from like the core things that we were doing. And so when we really kind of looked at like our profit and loss statement, like 90% of our revenue comes from 2 products. So we're like, why are we trying to like try all these other things? Like, let's continue to work on these. There's still so much low-hanging fruit on these 2 things. Let's continue to do these things and do them better and continue to improve them, optimize and tweak them. So that's really what we're trying to do at this very moment, is really not try to do more things, but try to do less things and cut things and really focus and dial in on the things that we do well instead of trying to do everything. So that has really made a big difference for us as well.
So the thing about Grant's story, that he touched upon this a little bit, but not as much as I would have loved, or really to give him credit. So as I mentioned at the beginning of this video, Grant liked to travel. He just didn't like to travel without his family. And because of him traveling, speaking, you know, he learned how to use credit reward points to his advantage. And now he travels a lot, but he always travels with either his entire family, or he'll go on special trips with his wife or with his daughters, and they have traveled to some amazing places. And I know this because I live close to him and I know when they're gone. But it's cool because he learned all this from speaking, but then he used that experience to create the online business that now gives him the ability to travel the entire world with his family. And he does that with his reward points and from his business. You know, he's got the freedom to do it when he wants, how he wants to do it, and it's just been fun to watch. And he just was one of those guys I had to have part of this Make 1K series, because he has built an amazing business, an amazing lifestyle, and just shows that you can do it if you have a desire, if you have a dream, you have a hope, and that's what Grant shows. So I hope you enjoyed his story. And if you haven't subscribed yet, please subscribe, because I got more success stories like this coming, sharing other people that have been able to build some amazing businesses. But once again, we're showing the behind the scenes, right? We're showing the origin story of how it all started, so that you can learn how to implement that in your own life. All right, y'all, until next time, this is Jeff Rose reminding you that it's your money, it's your life, and only you can make it awesome. Until then, peace.